Hey guys, Yips here, coming at you with another video, and this one is going to be about Argus the Endmaker, a DPS guide. This VOD is from my Twitch page, you can check it out there. And on this boss, you'll be running Writhe and Agony, Contagion, Soul Harvest with your choice of tier 100 talents. In this video, I'm choosing to run Siphon Life with tier 21. This video was made when the post nerfed, so this was the reset day of the nerf to Warlocks, which was around like a 4 to 5% DPS loss. So on this boss fight, there's a couple things you really have to focus on. In phase 1, it's about getting as many crit mastery buffs as you can and maximizing your DPS during those. Phase 2, it's about doing as much DPS possible to the adds as you can. And phase 3, you're just kind of focused on your single target as well as gaining additional shards from the orbs that spawn as well as helping your guild kill them. So on this boss, I always pop my first Soul Harvest as soon as I get my first stack of Mastery crit buff. I use my second Soul Harvest in this video during the ad phase because my guild ends up pushing the boss really quickly, so I don't have time to use my Soul Harvest in phase 2, or sorry, like kind of phase 2, transitioning into the ad phase. Otherwise, I wouldn't have it up right away for our Bloodlust in the ad phase. And then finally, you want to use your last Soul Harvest, obviously, in the last phase. So you see here, I get my Crit Mastery buff. I make sure I keep this up as much as I can throughout the fight, and I pop my first Soul Harvest. This lines up with my pot. It lines up with the Crit Mastery buff. It's just a little bit of extra DPS that you can gain for free, right? Don't use your first Soul Harvest right in the opener. Make sure you save it for that first Crit Mastery buff, because why not just get the extra 4,000 stat? Some guilds will push fairly slowly during this phase depending on your DPS, and if you're able to get a 5 stack of this Crit Mastery buff, you're actually going to be able to get 2 Soul Harvests off with the Crit Mastery buff, which is absolutely excellent. My guild, we pushed too quickly, so I don't get that benefit, but we do end up pushing the boss a bit faster. So you see, I'm just going about my regular rotation. I'm making sure that I use my Reap when I have an excess amount of soul shards, and when I do have that excess amount of soul shards, I make sure I use that bank during my Reap, as is good Writhe and Agony play, in order to maximize the damage benefit of those unstable afflictions. Outside of Reap though, I'm just casting 1 UA, making sure that I utilize my belt proc the best that I can, hoping to RNG out there on some shards. So phase 1 is obviously fairly simple to DPS in. You're really just focused on maximizing your drain soul uptime, keeping contagion and that debuff on the boss that it makes him take 15% more damage from your dots, as well as making sure that crit mastery buff doesn't fall off and you're not dropping those stacks. So you see here, I end up getting my 4 stack, and we're starting to transition into the next portion of the boss fight. Now, on this next portion of the boss fight, the most important thing that you need to worry about and to think about is make sure that you save your Reap souls for going into the ad phase. So for me, I stopped DPSing, well, not DPSing, but I stopped using my Reap at around 47-48%-ish, give or take. That leaves me 10% of the boss HP just to be generating my Reap Souls, making sure that I have an excess amount of those, so that when we transition into the ad phase and we're going to be using our Bloodlust and all of our cooldowns, I'm going to make sure that I have additional Reap banked active and ready to go so I can maximize my DPS during that phase, because your DPS in that phase is so much higher than your DPS in this single target phase that using Reap in the single target phase after a certain point is actually just inefficient, and you really need to be making sure that you're maximizing. So here I pop my last Reap stack, I pop my 5 stack, the boss is around 48%. I'm going to completely stop using Reap souls. I have my pot, I have Soul Harvest, and I'm starting to bank Reap, and I'm ready for that transition, which is going to happen at 40%. So if my guild was pushing this boss a little bit slower and doing slightly less DPS, as your guild might, I would have used my second Soul Harvest in this phase for sure. I would have used it early on in this phase, and I would have had it back up for the ad phase, but since we're pushing so quickly, I'm kind of nervous because I know I need to have that Soul Harvest buff up for Bloodlust and for my pot and stuff, so I just kind of play it safe and make sure that I don't use it here. So the boss is transitioning now. I have 4 stacks of Reap ready. I'll generate more throughout the phase, especially when the ads start dying. And this phase, it's very, very important how you play, okay? Your globals are literally going to be agony, 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 agony until you have agony on all of the ads, and then you're going to want to focus all of your single target onto the shadow ad while maintaining 15 stacks agonies all around the room. So you see what I'm going to do is first I'm targeting the shadow ad that spawns. The shadow ad spawns in my location that I'm clicking on right now, and you'll see I'm just flicking around the room, making sure I maintain my agonies. Now, you always want to make sure that you rotate in the same way, whether it be clockwise or counterclockwise. The reason being is because if you don't, your agony timers will be off, and by the time you get to the other side, if you swapped your rotation, the agonies will have fallen off. So you see what my strategy is. I'm just dumping all of my UAs into the shadow ad while I'm just flicking around the room, making sure I'm maintaining my 15 stacks. Super, super, super important. Once some ads start to die, you can do more than just maintain your agonies. You can start throwing out some corruptions. You can start throwing out some siphon lives, as you start seeing me do here. Because there are less ads active, I'm able to get these additional dots out and to increase my DPS. But when you have so many ads active, it's really, really, really important that you only put your agonies up, because that is your highest DPS dot outside of Unstable Affliction. Putting corruptions and siphons isn't worth it. You're just going to global cap yourself and be capped on shards. You would much rather spend that time either applying another agony or casting Unstable Affliction. So you see here, I wasn't too high on the DPS meter, but after this phase, I just shoot up and I'm at 2.2 or 2.3 million almost, just from this ad phase, just by, really maximizing my DPS, making sure I have that reap up time, using my soul harvest once I have all of those agonies out to get like a 40-second soul harvest and just absolutely destroy that phase. That's really where you're getting most of your damage on this boss fight. Now, the last phase of the boss is coming up. You're going to have another pot, you're going to have your soul harvest coming off, you want to make sure you augment rune once you res, but you have a few decisions to make depending on your guild's DPS. You can either use your soul harvest right away if your guild's DPS is kind of slow, and make sure that you have another one up for the end of the fight. Even if your DPS in your guild is really good, what you can do is you can save that soul harvest for your second pot, and you can save it for when the orbs spawn around the room, and you can agony all of the orbs and get an increased duration soul harvest. So just depending on your guild's DPS, depending if you'll get 1 or 2 additional soul harvests, you want to make sure that you maximize that. So you see here, I tend to kind of hope that I RNG out, and I kind of wait for the orbs to spawn. The orbs tend to be pretty finicky on heroic difficulty, at least. Sometimes they spawn right away, sometimes you don't. I actually here end up waiting for these soul orbs to spawn, I believe, and then once they spawn, I make sure I agony all 3 of them, pop my soul harvest, and get that additional 12-second buff out. Otherwise, this is just simply a single target phase. So you see here, cast my agonies on all of the orbs, and make sure I pop that soul harvest now, and then just really focus on single targeting the boss. If an orb in the back is high, I'll cast a UA or 2 on it, but generally speaking, these orbs die extremely quickly for me, so I don't need to focus much more than just applying agonies to them. I basically make the orbs my little shard bots. When they spawn, I just kind of throw agonies on as many of them as I can. If some of them are living longer, I will throw a corruption, maybe an unstable affliction on them just to make sure that they die. But other than that, my guild seems to be pretty proficient at killing them, so I don't really need to spend too many of my resources targeting them. Otherwise, I'm just, keeping my UA on the boss, keeping my contagion uptime, making sure I'm using my reap, using all of that stuff really smartly, and the boss goes down. So really major points on this boss fight. Most of your damage is going to happen during that ad transition phase. Make sure you're dumping all of your UAs into that shadow buff, and aside from that, just circling around the room, making sure you're maintaining 15 stack agonies on all of the other ads, and your DPS is going to be insane during that phase. So you see, I'm just kind of targeting the orbs if I have to, if they're not going to end up dying, and aside from that, when I have an excess amount of shards, popping my reap, casting all of my UAs into the boss, and just doing lock stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it gives you some ideas on how to do damage to this boss, some ideas on the timings of this boss as well, when to use your cooldowns, and just how to do damage. So hopefully this just helped you guys out. Hopefully you guys like this. My next video guide will be on Coven, I believe. So if you're curious about how to DPS on Coven, that should be coming out in the next couple days as well. So hopefully you guys like this. Hopefully it helped you out, and I will see you guys later. Enjoy the rest of the boss kill.